The U.S. Supreme Court justices heard arguments regarding a nationwide ban on mifepristone, the primary drug used in the U.S. for medication abortions. Protesters, both pro-choice and pro-life, rallied outside the high court today as the justices heard the case. Last year, a district court judge in Texas ruled the FDA was wrong to approve mifepristone in 2000, and anti-abortion advocates argue the FDA unlawfully relaxed restrictions on access to the pill years later. If the Supreme Court agrees, access to mifepristone may be limited.
Without question, the FDA's actions have made taking chemical abortion drugs less safe. Today, I argued before the United States Supreme Court on behalf of doctors and medical associations who have witnessed these harms firsthand. The FDA violated federal law and its duty to keep women safe.
Last year, 63% of terminated pregnancies in the U.S. were performed with this method. That's according to the Guttmacher Institute, an organization that focuses on reproductive health. A group of former FDA commissioners wrote to the Supreme Court in a legal brief, arguing that challenging drugs on ideological beliefs could weaken the FDA's authority.
FDA approved mifepristone based on the agency's scientific judgment that the drug is safe and effective. It's maintained that judgment across 5 presidential administrations, and millions of Americans have used mifepristone to safely end their pregnancies. Respondents may not agree with that choice, but that doesn't give them Article 3 standing or a legal basis to upend the regulatory scheme.
In Wisconsin, local organizations and health officials are responding to the case.
And mifepristone is one of the 2 medications that we use for medication abortion, but also for managing miscarriages. And it is the most effective, safest form of medication out there to manage miscarriage and abortion.
In a statement, the legislative director for Pro-Life Wisconsin writes in part, quote, "When a woman is facing an unplanned pregnancy, the reckless use of a toxic chemical abortion drug is the last thing she needs. Most importantly, this abortion drug must be outright banned as its pharmacological purpose is to kill a preborn living human being," end quote. A final decision from the Supreme Court is expected in July.